Awesome. Rock and roll. All righty. So where we're going to pick up, I got really excited because I'm like, I figured out all the buttons. Yes. It doesn't take much these days. All right. So where we're going to pick up is on page 116. And where we're at in the chapter Two Wives is a really, really cool transition. So up until this point, we've been talking about how do we deal with that loved one that we're unable to leave? How do we deal with this alcoholic or this addict or this compulsive individual who's unable to stop? And how can we best support and support them if they're if they're possibly willing or they're definitely willing? Like, how can we best support them? But now is this really cool transition. So at this point in Two Wives, it doesn't state it. There's not like an announcement. So I'm making the announcement. The alcoholic is sober. And we're starting to transition into what it really looks like to practice these principles, these 12 steps in all our affairs. And there's, some of you might be in relationships. And even if you're not in relationships, as in romantic relationships, we have to live in relation with other people, despite how hard some of us try not to on the isolation station. And this part of the book helps us navigate how we interact with others and practice these principles in all our affairs. And if I do well on time, which I probably won't, we might, but probably won't, get to one of the first places in the book that discusses what you should do if you've relapsed after coming to Alcoholics Anonymous. It's one of only 3 places, and the third one is just heavily implied. But we get actual directions. And I want to point out, and maybe I should save this for when and if we get there, probably next week, to be honest with you guys. But the reason that direction is hidden away in the later chapters is because if I'm doing this work as it's laid out in this book, we stay sober. Relapse isn't a common thing. So, but we know in our experience, those of us who haven't done this work or before we come to 12 step, and relapse is inevitable. And that's our step 1 experience. So rocking and rolling on page 116. And we're on the second full paragraph, about halfway through the page. It says, we have elsewhere remarked how much better life is when lived on a spiritual plane. And what we're talking about is a continuation of the idea that this is a spiritual way of life. This is not a set it and forget it deal. You know what I'm saying? I say that from the beginning. This is a way of life, and it is spiritual plane of life. And it is not that I have AA or OA or CA or whatever fellowship I'm a part of over here, and then I have my little work, not little, but I have my work, I have my family over there. No, this is how I show up to all areas of my life. And we can ask ourselves, hey, isn't it my experience that life is better lived on this spiritual plane? I hope so. If not, stick around after. We'll get you connected. I promise it's better. And it says, if God can solve, and I want to point out solve, not cured, but pointing to the idea of recovered, where the mental obsession is removed, pointing to those step 10 promises, solve the age-old riddle of alcoholism. He can solve your problems too. And I want to point something out. Yeah, solve. And I love the idea of solve your problems too. So what we're going to do, and I'm sure this is a shock to anyone that knows me, we're going to bounce around the big book just a little bit, because as we talk about these 12 steps, solving all our problems, that's not a new idea. Let's go to the very bottom of page 13. And I so appreciate you guys indulging me on my big book bounce arounds. Off we go. Whee! Bottom of page 13. And this is the very bottom paragraph. It says, my friend promise. And this is the promise that Ebby Thatcher makes to Bill Wilson. And it says, when these things were done, these things are the actions of the 12 steps. I would enter upon a new relationship with my creator. He's promising the spiritual awakening. And that promise that Ebby Thatcher makes to Bill is the same promise that is made to us on page 60. Having had a spiritual awakening is the result of these steps. If I do this work to the best of my ability, it is promised to me. But that's not the point that I wanted to make, but I just got excited about that point. It's hard not to. It's so good. It's a promise that I would enter upon a new relationship with my creator, that I would have the elements of a way of living, annoyingly, way of life, not a set it and forget it. I can't have my crock pot sobriety. You know what I mean? I can't set it and forget it. I got to have that stir fry. I got to be up there in there every day, you know? But elements of a way of living which answered all my problems, all my problems. So this idea that the 12 steps, because what we're getting into in the chapter 2 Wives is the idea of, and it's a lot of the same principles that we were seeing as we were talking about the 6 principles of success. I need to work these steps myself, regardless of how I'm approaching this book. I got to work these steps. And man, these spiritual actions work in all areas of my life. I can take them to all areas. And that's not to say don't get outside help. If you need outside help, please do. But man, that's what this is meant for, how I live my life. Now, if that was the only bounce around, we'd probably get to the end of the chapter, but it's not. Let's pop over to page 42. I know. Page 42. And we're going to go to the very, 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 very bottom of page 42. And this is, if you're wondering, who are we talking about here? This is our homie Fred. He had a perfect day and got drunk. You know what I mean? Anyone here ever have a case of a perfect day and got drunk or got loaded or relapsed? You know what I mean? Fred. And very, very bottom paragraph 42. It says, quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles. Now, I talk about this, the track that I take, and it's, I should finish my point before I go on a tangent mid-sentence. It's me. The track that I take is that the spiritual principles, it's cool and it's not wrong and it's not bad, but I don't take the idea that it's not the nebulous hope, faith, courage, brotherly love. You know, I don't take that track. I take the track that the principles are the tangible actions of the steps. Because that's something I can practice. I make the joke that I can't pull hope out of my butt. I just can't. Maybe you can. I can't. And but by the way, I also want to say I'm not poo-pooing that idea of the or downplaying that. Like if that's something that works for you and resonates with you, amazing. Use it. I was talking with one of my pillars. I was doing a 10th step with her, and we were talking, and she's like, you know, the principle behind step 9 is justice, and it just opens up some 9th step stuff for me that was real in that moment. So again, I'm not saying I'm right, but I just think if we haven't looked at this idea of the principles being the actions of the steps, oh, come join me being wrong. You know, I'll be wrong. It's fun over here. Let's have a look-see doodles, you know? And so it says, quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles, so these tangible actions would solve all my problems, absolutely. And so that's what we're looking at. Now I won't take us to 52. Some of you guys joined me at the big book study that I was at earlier today, and I was just on the cusp of the bedevilments. And even in the bedevilments, it talks about, hey, why shouldn't we apply on page 52 to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view? So again, the idea that these 12 steps are going to work on all my problems. So back to 116. Haven't made it through the first paragraph yet. That's how we're doing today. So back to 116. So where I tangented us off, that's not a word, was if God can solve the age-old riddle of alcoholism, he can solve your problems too. And it says, we wives found that, and I want to point something out, like everybody else. Now, as an alcoholic, as an addict, as a compulsive, whatever brings you to this study, we definitely have defects of character. And I will say, I think for some of us, they are probably a lot louder than the average population. I'll give us that. But Normal people have defects too. I always want to make the joke, like, the spiritual malady is not limited to us. If you don't believe me, go to your HOA or your PTA. You know what I mean? You will find some spiritually sick individuals, God bless, they're hurting, right? And so wives have found, and again, wives are those, we don't have to look at it as wives. Instead of wives, let's look at it, those as bound to the alcoholic as the alcoholic is bound to alcohol. Those of us who are the unhealed codependent, that's what we're talking about, have found that like everybody else, we were afflicted with pride, self-pity, vanity, and all the things which go to make up the self-centered person. Just calling me out for my self-pity, pride, and vanity. And I want to point something out. When I got here, I heard self-centered person, and I was like, no, 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 no. I am not self-centered. I'm not thinking about how great I am. But what was I riddled with? I was riddled with self-pity and self-hatred, and what a piece of garbage I was, and how life wasn't fair. So I was centered upon self. That pride, that vanity, that self-centeredness, that I'm not enough. It was there. And it says, and we were not above selfishness or dishonesty. Rude, rude of the book to just call us out like that. Or just me, didn't call you out, just called me out. It's fine. I know I'm the only one riddled with these things. And if you don't believe me, you can ask my sponsor. He'll tell you. And it says, as our husbands began to apply, so as those who are afflicted with the illness of addiction, alcoholism, whatever is bringing you to the study, began to apply spiritual principles in their lives, we began to see the desirability of doing so too. And one of the lines I love in this book, it's on bottom of page 18. You don't have to bounce around there if you don't want to. I'll just tell you what it is. It's that it's in talks about, in Ontario, it's called the sponsorship contract, where it's like, this is who I need to be to show up for sponsorship. But there's that line where it says that his whole deportment shouts at the new prospect that he is a man with a real answer. And I love that line because and I know I get loud. It's an enthusiasm problem. I was just saying I couldn't tone it down if I wanted to. And some people want me to, and I can't. I'm sorry. But that my job is not to shout at my sponsees. I don't do any yelling. But my job is to work these 12 steps in such a way that who I am, how I carry myself, the light that is on in my eyes, the ineffable joy that permeates the room, that is not me, but flows through me. That is my responsibility to those around me. That is my responsibility to my sponsees. That is my responsibility to those who are hurting and those who are suffering. And that's the thing. If there's a person that I love and that I care about, but they are not open to this work, or there's a person in the meeting that we're judging because they're not doing the work. You know what I'm saying? Any of that. If I'm experiencing any of that, the best thing that I could possibly do is work these 12 steps with the vigor and rigor, like my life depends on it, so that joy, that light shines out. Man, they can't deny that a change has happened. Often we get sober and we want, like, our partners, our spouses, or the people in our lives, hey, you got to do these steps. But I can't tell them what to do. They're not going to listen. But if I demonstrate the change that has happened to me, that might open them up. So that's my responsibility. So I like to emphasize that. Like I don't get to get well, so I get well. I mean, that's amazing. And I love that. It's great not to want to die every moment of the day, genuinely. But I also have to get well so that others can see that they can get well. You know what I'm saying? Anywho, so that was one paragraph. I don't think we're getting to the end of this chapter today. And it says, at first, some of us did not believe we needed this help. And here's my experience. I've done a lot of helpline work, like answering phone lines for various 12-step fellowships. And I will say, in my experience, about half the calls were, hey, what meeting is this? When's this meeting? What's this address? I'd say about a quarter of the calls was I need help, and another quarter of the calls was a loved one of mine needs help. And it's one of those things when a loved one is burning their life to the ground with alcoholism or drug addiction or some addictive behavior, and it's like undeniable that their life is on fire, it can be really easy to be like, I'm not the one that needs help. But I'm reminded, and this was told to me when I wanted somebody to help my partner because he was not well. And the person on the other end of the line said, Paige, you're the one that called. You're the one that wants the help. And so it can be really easy to be like, oh, I don't need help. But man, if I'm affected by other people's actions, I need help. And I'm grateful to have had some real Al-Anon experience. I've done a set of steps in Al-Anon, a set of traditions in Al-Anon. I've done a little bit of Al-Anon. And so when people call, just like with an alcoholic, you should go to AA, or a drug addict, you should go to CA. Like an Al-Anon, you should go to Al-Anon. I don't need to go to Al-Anon. But instead, what do I get to do? I get to share my experience. This is what I found. This is what happened for me. And at minimum, it was really nice to know that I was not alone. And so again, what are we sharing with people our experience? So again, not new concepts, not new ideas. We're carrying the threads through the chapter 2 whys. All right. And I'm sure nobody here has ever had a thought like this. I know none of you guys could relate to this at all. We thought on the whole that we were pretty good women, capable of being nicer if our husbands stopped drinking. I will be nicer to you when you change your behavior. You know, I know, radical. Nobody ever relates to that. And it says, but it was a silly idea that we were too good to need God. Now we try to put spiritual principles to work in every department of our lives. Again, what we're seeing on page 13, on page 42, kind of pointing to in the bedevilments on page 52. Oh, we're on page 116. And no worries. I always like to say the only meeting you're ever late to is your first one. Just glad you're here. All right. It was a silly idea that we were too good to need God. Now we try to put spiritual principles. And again, for me, I like to look at it, these actions, these tangible actions of the steps to work in every department of our lives. When we do that, we find it solves our problems too. What a wonderful, sneaky little promise. And it says, the ensuing lack of fear, worry, and hurt feelings, and it is a wonderful thing. And some of you guys know I love finding sneaky prayers, sneaky promises, and sneaky descriptions of a spiritual awakening. I mean, they're not sneaky. I just called them sneaky because I didn't see them for a long time. And the result of the 12 steps, the result is a spiritual awakening. And so the result of these 12 steps is this ensuing lack of fear, worry, and hurt feelings. So those are some symptoms of a spiritual awakening, just if you're wondering. How great is that? You didn't know that was in there. I didn't know that was in there until I really got into 2 wives. That's why I love studying the later chapters. It's my jam. I mean, the whole 164 and Dr. Bob's Nightmare is my jam, but it's my jam. Alrighty. And it says, we urge you to try our program. So the program is the 12 steps. We urge you to try these 12 steps taken out of this book. For nothing will be so helpful to your husband as the radically changed attitude toward him, which God will show you how to have. And again, a radically changed attitude is a symptom of a spiritual experience, a spiritual awakening. That's what we're talking about, because it wasn't something I could do on my own. It is God that does it for me and God that does it through me. And it says, go along with your husband if you possibly can. And what it means by that, in case you take that line out of context, and it's like, I'm not watching golf on Sunday. You don't have to. That's not what we're talking about. That idea of go along with these 12 steps, go along with this way of life if you possibly can. And again, me being a demonstration of these principles, me working these 12 steps in such a way that the light is on, the joy is pervasive, like that is what will get people, to do it, be filled with joy. So If you and your husband find a solution, there it is, a solution. We are recovered, we're not cured, but there's a solution for the pressing problem of drink. You are, of course, going to be very happy. But all problems will not be solved at once. And here's where we begin to look at things in a non-dual way. And by non-dual, what I mean is the opposite of black and white. Non-dual is where two things can be true. The first thing that is true is that when we do this work, we have powerful, spectacular, dramatic recoveries. We're deeply and profoundly changed. And this is also true. We still struggle, and we still have tough moments, and we still have defects, and we can still be a bit of a dinky-doo sometimes, you know? Just me. I said dinky doo, and for the Canadians, I was thinking of Sharon Lois and Bram, Skinnamarink dinky dink. That's me, Skinnamarink doo. That's not you. I got to take my inventory. I love you. Yeah, the Canadians know. I'm so sorry for everyone else. That is some ADHD that I don't have already. So, but all problems will not be solved at once. There will still be problems. And that's what I mean by non-dual. You know, this is not asking us to be perfect. This is asking us to grow towards spiritual perfection, knowing that we will fall short. The program, these 12 steps, give us the grace to make mistakes and to learn from them. And it says seed has started to sprout in new soil, but growth has only begun. Oh, I know we got at least one gardener in here, somebody that knows plants and stuff. I know. Yeah. Probably more. Actually, yeah, at least two. Yeah. We got some plant homies. And so for my plant homies, you guys know when you plant seeds, a seed has everything that it needs to grow. Everything that a seed needs is already contained within the shell of the seed. And if it is planted in good soil, it will grow under the right conditions. Now, when a seed starts to grow, where does it grow first? It grows first its roots. It grows down, exactly. And the thing is, if for our gardening homies, what you guys do not do, I hope, is get really impatient and then like dig up the seed and be like, have you grown? And then put it back. And then, you know what I mean? You just trust that there is growth happening, even though you cannot see it. I hope. I don't garden well, so I don't like, you know what I mean? If you're like, no, that's exactly how you garden, I'd be like, okay, I don't know. But that's the thing is before you see the sprouting above the soil, it's got to grow underground. So just because I don't see immediate results does not mean that things are not happening. But the seed has started to sprout. We're seeing it. But growth has just begun. This is the start of growth, and the growth does not end. This is not a one and done. This is a way of life, continued growth. And it says, in spite of your newfound happiness, there will be ups and downs. Oh man, what do you mean? It's not smooth sailing for the rest of my life. There will be ups and downs. Many of the old problems will still be with you. Isn't this a radical idea? This is as it should be. This is as it should be. And why would it be as it should be? Because it is only through my struggles and my problems that I learn and grow. And so often we know, how do we come to God? How do we come to a spiritual awakening? It's rarely, everything's amazing, I need to have a spiritual awakening. It's usually a coming to the end of myself. It's usually pain that leads me to that greater freedom, that greater knowing. And yeah, that we're not expected to be perfect little robots. We're expected to be human and fallible and make mistakes, but learn and grow from them through the application of these 12 steps. And it says, the faith and sincerity of both you and your husband will be put to the test. Faith and sincerity of working these steps is a way of life. Doing this, that's what we're talking about. These workouts would be struggles and arguments. So if you're fighting with your partner quite a bit, you just be like, listen, we're just getting buff. We're working out. Don't tell that to them unless they're in the mood for it, the sense of humor. You know, pick your moments. Don't do it in the middle of the workout. So these workouts should be regarded as part of your education, for thus you will be learning to live. See, this is learning. We're growing. We're never done. And it says you will make mistakes. You will. We will. We're going to mess up. I mess up a lot. You will make mistakes. But if you are in earnest, which is that sincerity, or trying to a greater extent than before, they will not drag you down. And that's a beautiful sneaky little promise. Instead, you will capitalize them. And a better way of life will emerge when they are overcome. And those of us who have been on the spiritual journey a little while, and by spiritual journey, I mean working these 12 steps is a way of life for a while. You guys know what it's like to kind of look back in the rear view mirror and be like, man, I'm so glad I don't live that way anymore. And I'm not talking about like active addiction, active alcoholism. I'm talking about some of the like, man, I'm so glad that I don't just avoid communicating to the last possible minute anymore. Or I'm so glad that I have some freedom from judgment or gossip. Do you know what I mean? That sort of thing. And it's like we get to continue to grow. And an even better way of life happens as we continue to grow. I really talk about, I spoke about this at the last meeting, which worked a little better because we were talking a lot about airplanes. I was talking a lot about airplanes. Nobody else was. It was me thing. But that idea, there's no glass ceiling. There's no glass ceiling. I get to continue to grow. And it says, some of the snags you will encounter, these will happen, are irritation, hurt feelings, and resentments. Those will happen. That's why we have the 10th step. That's why we have the evening review, because we will have those things. That's what inventory is for. Your husband will sometimes be unreasonable. Some of you guys are like, I relate to this intimately. Your husband will sometimes be unreasonable, and you will want to criticize. Starting from a speck on the domestic horizon, great thunderclouds of dispute may gather. You know, it just seems like a little speck, and it grows into this monstrous storm. These family dissensions are very dangerous, especially to your husband. Often you must carry the burden of avoiding them or keeping them under control. Now, what I will say is we are the ones reading Two Wives, and some of you guys are like, hey, I didn't get a warning ahead of time that this was going to have to apply to me, even though I'm the alcoholic or the drug addict or the, compulsive, whatever brings you to this study. But here's the thing. If I am reading this chapter, I am the one with the tools. And I've got some terrible news. If I am the one with the tools, the simple kit of spiritual tools, it is my responsibility to use them. So we don't get to take that line and throw it at our spouse or throw it at our partner or throw it at our non-alcoholic friends and be like, you got to carry this burden. No, it's now on us. So sorry, you're like, I just came here to listen to you natter and go on tangents for about an hour. I didn't expect to have responsibilities. I know it's rude of me. I'll make a formal amends after. Alrighty. And it says, never forget that resentment is a deadly hazard to an alcoholic. And so regardless of who I am, even if I'm resistant to like, oh man, I got to be responsible for, avoiding family dissensions, man, this applies to each and every one of us. Resentment is a deadly hazard. If you remember, as we were going through step 4, resentment destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From resentment stem all forms of spiritual disease. See, when I live in resentment, it blocks me off from the sunlight of the Spirit. And that is that connection to God. And in so doing, I am in that darkness and the insanity, the mental obsession comes back, and I will relapse. And so that is my responsibility. And so it's on my point out when I work with my sponsees, I'm big on like, listen, inventory it. I'll inventory it with you. I'll even do a lot of the heavy lifting of the inventory. You know what I mean? I will handhold you through this process. But if it comes up, let's take it through the columns. Let's utilize this way of getting freedom from it so that I don't have to live in that darkness and I don't have to relapse and I can continue to grow and use that to help others. It does no good for me to be like, it's not a resentment, I'm just a little frustrated. And that was happening so much that you know how I have my little handouts that I made for fears and resentments and sex conduct? Well, I made ones, it's the just a little frustrated columns. They look eerily similar to resentments, but totally different thing. So if you got a sponsee or you're struggling, like, I'm not resentful, I'm just a little frustrated, you let me know, I'll send you the columns. You might be like, hey, this looks like resentments. It's completely different though. Yeah. Alrighty. And it says, we do not mean that you have to agree with your husband whenever there is an honest difference of opinion. Just be careful not to disagree in a resentful or critical spirit. Now, taking out the, husband, wife, spouse, whatever, taking that out and just looking at it like, just be careful not to disagree in a resentful or critical spirit. Has disagreeing in a resentful or critical spirit ever gotten me anywhere? Or just more resentment and criticism, It's just not effective. Like it's just not an effective way to find resolution, to work together, to come to an agreement, and to work through. And that, again, we don't have to agree. We can disagree and disagree without being disagreeable, as people like to say. And those of you who are married or in long-term relationships, you can let me know if this is true. I know it is. I know. You and your husband will find that you can dispose of serious problems easier than you can the trivial ones. It's like there's a crisis, you're able to come together. But if you do not pick up your effing socks, I will murder you, which is a little aggressive. That's why we need to take inventory. And then I'll come to my sponsee. I'm like, if we want to, do bad things over socks that are left out, we might want to do some inventory. I'm like, I'm just a little frustrated. It's not a resentment, Paige. But it says next time, and this is a beautiful way to handle arguments, a beautiful way, and I'm going to break it down. It says, next time you and he have a heated discussion, no matter what the subject. So it's starting to get into a real argument. You can tell your emotions are flared. The other person's emotions are flared. You can tell you're starting. I'm sure no one here knows what it's like to have those argument loops where it's the same argument over and over and over again. And you just fall into that argument loop. So when we start falling into the argument loop, we can say this: no matter what the subject, it should be the privilege of either to smile and say, this is getting serious. So we're going to acknowledge the situation. I'm sorry I got disturbed. And there's an immediate owning of what is mine. I got disturbed. 12 and 12, it talks about anytime, the spiritual axiom means truth. Anytime I am disturbed, no matter what the cause, there's something wrong with me, which is rude. Rude. And accurate, which is ruder, So I'm sorry I got disturbed. So we're going to own that. And it says, let's talk about it later. And that's important. There are people who are like, who need time to cool down and calm down. That is not my natural argument style. I want to deal with it right now, get it solved right now. It doesn't matter how unproductive it is. I want to fix it now. Like, that's just kind of how my brain works. But I love that, where it's like, we're not going to get to a healthy resolution at the moment. We both need to step back, right? But I love that it's not a dismissing. It's not we're getting serious, let's not talk about that. We're not avoiding the issue. We're making a promise and a commitment to come back to the issue when we are spiritually centered. And this is a beautiful way to handle disagreements and arguments and argument loops, hi Betty, that we have in relationships. I think he might have missed me when I was gone in Ontario. I can't tell though, I'm not sure. Yay. So if your husband is trying to live on a spiritual basis as in way of life, basis for life, how we live our life, he will also be doing everything in his power to avoid disagreement or contention. So again, what I was saying, if I'm reading this, if I'm showing up to this big book study, if I'm working these steps, I'm the one with the tools. It's my responsibility to use them. So it says your husband, so the alcoholic or the addict or, the compulsive overeater, compulsive gambler, that which is bringing you to this study, your husband knows he owes you more than sobriety. And didn't we see that in step 9, So of course, the alcohol, like we think a man is unthinking when he says sobriety is enough. You know what I mean? Sobriety has to be my baseline, but I've got to make those amends. So it says, your husband knows he owes you more than sobriety. He wants to make good, yet you must not expect too much. And this is that non-dual consciousness where both things are true, where it's like we do have those spectacular recoveries, and we do have those nagging defects that are sometimes pervasive. Do you know what I mean? His ways of thinking and doing are the habits of years. And this is the direction. Patience, tolerance, understanding, and love are the watchwords. Here's what I've got to do. I've got to take those, show him these things in yourself. So I've got to give them first, and they will be reflected back to you from him. So I give them and they will be reflected back. And I'm going to pop us over to page 83. I didn't promise that would be my last bounce around. So, but let's pop over to page 83 when we're in step 9. And it's bottom of 82 is where it says, we feel is a man is unthinking when he says sobriety is enough. And above that, it says it certainly must keep sober, for there will be no home if he doesn't. But he is yet a long way from making good to the wife or parents whom for years he has so shockingly treated. So sobriety is not an amends. But where I actually wanted us to go to, and I got distracted on page 82, was 83. And it's the first full paragraph, and it's the last sentence of the first paragraph on page 83, where it says, so we clean house with the family, asking each morning in meditation. So asking is a prayer, and in meditation means that we do have a morning meditation practice. It's the thing we do that, that our Creator show us the way of patience, tolerance, kindliness, and love. And I love that idea of like I was saying, I can't just, man, there are times where I just can't pull tolerance out. You know what I mean? I just can't be tolerant. So I look at it this way. I turn to God. And what really I'm asking God to do is get me out of the way, because I can't do it. And let God's patience, tolerance, understanding, kindliness, and love flow through me. That's what I'm trying to do. And I got to show this. So back on 118, we can meander. We can take our time back to 118. But I say that prayer. I bring that into meditation. I show that to them. I show that to the difficult people in our lives. And then it gets reflected back to us. But that's the thing, is I've got to do it first. I can't wait for them to do it. I've got to do it first. So back on 118. And it's the second full paragraph, because I know I'm bouncing us around. And it's right after patience, tolerance, understanding, and love are the watchwords. Show them these things in yourself, and they will be reflected to you, back to you from him. Live and let live is the rule. Live and let live. And one of the things I want to point out, in Al-Anon, they are big on slogans. In their book, they have a whole section on slogans. But they broke down some of the slogans, one of which is live and let live. And I saw it in a new way, because oftentimes we kind of fixate, maybe it's just me, on let live. Like let live and let live. Let them do what they're going to do. Let them live their lives. But there's a first part of that, which is live. I get to live. I get to do the things that I'm called to do. I get to lean into, do you know what I mean? I get to live and let live. You know, I got to do both, right? And it says, if you both show a willingness to remedy your own defects, how do I remedy them? Well, one, I'm going to make amends for them. You know, when they crop up, right? I'm going to continue to utilize the 10th step. That's another way. And the other way that I love is in Bill's story, I must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all, seeking God in all things. That is how I show willingness. So those ways, make amends for it, continue to do step 10, which would involve amends, you know, and evening review, and seeking God's will in everything that I do. And it says there will be little need to criticize each other. So that's important, that I'm not trying to remedy your defects. That's not what I'm trying to do. Not trying to remedy you, trying to remedy me. Work on me, like, well, not, I don't work on me. I take these actions and I let God work on me. That's what I'm doing. So I got to do that. And then you're like, oftentimes, genuinely, oftentimes we have difficult families or come from difficult families, family of origin, or maybe just have, for somebody like me, being an alcoholic, being a drug addict, that erodes trust and connection and communication and love and affection in any relationship that I'm in. And, oftentimes I'm like, man, why didn't that person apologize? Why didn't they make an amends? Why are they still doing that? It's important to remember is sometimes people don't know. Do you know what I mean? I didn't know how to make an amends when I got here. I didn't know how to take inventory when I got here. But if I show up with that, I want to let you know that it was wrong with me how I treated you the other day. Do you know what I mean? That creates language and dialogue that other people can use. I've got to take these actions first. And I might just be showing them how they can do it, Anyway, that's just my little thing. Okay. We women carry with us a picture of the ideal man. So we have this ideal partner, the sort of chap we would like our husbands to be. Now, I'm sure nobody here has ever done this. But did you ever, again, I'm sure it's just me, ever get in a relationship based on potential? Oh, it's got a lot of potential. If you're wondering, potential is not tangible, nor is marketable, and is kind of non-consensual. I've just decided this person has potential in this one area, and I've decided they've got to do it. I haven't asked them if that was what they would like to do, but that is what I would like them to do so that they can complete me. It's not codependent. It's fine. Again, I'm sure I'm the only one. No one relates to that. But we hold these people, the people in our lives, to these standards, these expectations that we've created. It is the most natural thing in the world, once his liquor problem is solved, to feel that he will now measure up to that cherished vision. Ah, yes, my ideal partner. Yes, I have it in my mind. The chances are he will not. We're just going to be us. For like yourself, he is just beginning his development. Again, beginning this way of life, and it says, be patient. Another feeling we are likely to entertain is one of resentment, that love and loyalty could not cure our husbands of alcoholism. And this is a helpful piece of step one information. I cannot be loved. And not that we don't show up and we love newcomers, we love those who are hurting, they're struggling, but human love is not enough to keep somebody like me sober. And loyalty is not enough to keep somebody like me sober. What I'm trying to say is human power cannot keep me sober. Nothing less than a spiritual awakening that I continue to grow will keep me sober. You know what I'm saying? And it says, we do not like the thought that the contents of a book or the work of another alcoholic, right? So that's the directions on how to get well in the book, or the idea if they've been sponsored, right? Has accomplished in a few weeks. And I always want to point that stuff out because we see some timelines for things. The timeline to get well is a few weeks, which I love because it really emphasizes, man, I was scared of that when I got here. I was not excited. That was not a joyful prospect. I'm like, but it doesn't take long to get well. If you're hurting today, if you're struggling today, if you're relapsing today, if you're coming back today, it does not take long to get well. We don't have to wait to get well. We don't have to wait to recover. We can get well very, 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 very quickly. And that is good news because you don't have to be in the pain that you're in right now any longer. We've got an answer. And it says, at such moments, we forget that alcoholism is an illness over which we could have not possibly had any power beyond human aid, human power, love of family, love of parents, spouses, the love of our children, the best sponsor in the world cannot keep me sober. They can lay down the simple kit of spiritual tools as laid out in this book, but they can't make me sober. The best home group in the world, if I don't do this work, cannot keep me sober. You know what I'm saying? The best rehab, the best doctors, the best psychologists, the best psychiatrists cannot keep me sober. Going to the best gym, going to the best city. I don't know. I was thinking the geographic. Argue in the chat about what's the best city. Maybe don't. There'll be hurt feelings. And people will just be picking on other cities. But like, you know what I mean? The best human power is not sufficient. It goes on to say, your husband will be the first to say it was your devotion and care which brought him to the point where he could have a spiritual experience. Without you, he would have gone to pieces long ago. And some of us are and have been kept alive by, family members and loved ones that maybe did enable us. Do you know what I mean? And this is the direction. When resentful thoughts come, try to pause and count your blessings. And so that, I will say, that is a direction for the Al-Anon. But when I'm feeling that like jealousy or that insecurity, that like, why couldn't it have been me? It's an important, I can pause and find those things that I can be grateful for. And here are some blessings. Here are some things that we get to be grateful for. And so, by the way, sometimes people point things out like, gratitude, it doesn't really try. I'm like, well, pause, count your blessings. That sounds like gratitude, guys. Sounds like that's in there. So after all, your family is reunited. Alcohol is no longer a problem. And you and your husband are working together toward an undreamed of future. I mean, those are some things to be grateful for. Now, I haven't yet promised that was going to be our last Big Book bounce around. So let's have another bounce. I know, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's go page 100. Let's go page 100. Because it's fun. Some of you guys are like, this is not fun. But we're going anyways. We'll miserably bounce to page 100. All right, page 100, first full paragraph. It says both you and the new man, it's sponsee is what it's talking about, must walk. But I mean, I think it does apply. It kind of did two wives, like the spouses working their own programs together. Anywho, must walk day by day in the path of spiritual progress. If you persist, remarkable things will happen. When we look back, we realize the things which came to us when we put ourselves in God's hands. How do I put myself in God's hands? I work these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it, because it does. We're better than anything we could have planned. Working together towards an undreamed of future, better than anything we could have planned. Follow the dictates of a higher power, follow the directions of the steps, and you'll presently live in a new and wonderful world, no matter what your present circumstances. So let's pop back over to page 119. Bounce it around. And it says, page 119. I'm just giving a pause because sometimes I bounce too quickly. All right, still another difficulty is that you may become jealous of the attention he bestows on other people, especially alcoholics. Man, you tell me you're going to go work with another sponsee, you got another 12-step call? Yeah, and this is, again, something that we're going to pick up and we're going to continue to see in the later chapters. You have been starving for his companionship, yet he spends long hours helping other men and their families. And like, of course, we do need to give our family, our spouses, our partners attention. We do need to be mindful of them and our responsibility to them. We are not going to get far if we're not showing that love under our own roof. But I need to be inconvenienced by my sponsees. You know what I mean? If I am not a little bit inconvenienced, I don't have enough sponsees. You can garden, my gardeners. You guys can garden, but you got to find it the sponsees a little inconvenient. You know what I'm saying? And it says, you feel he should now be yours. The fact is that he should work with other people to maintain his own sobriety. We work with others to stay sober. Sponsorship is that it's this theme we've seen from the Roman numerals all the way to 119, and we're going to see it beyond. If I want permanent, contented sobriety, I've got to work with others. I've got to work with others. I've got to take them through these steps. Now, if you're here today and you're like, I haven't done that, or I don't know how, or I'm afraid, like truly, let us help you. Let us help you. I promise it's not as scary as it feels. Keep in mind, we're dealing with alcoholics or drug addicts. I mean, it's a progressive terminal disease. It's as bad as it's going to get. You're not going to make it worse. And you don't have the power to fix them. You don't have the power to cure them. That's what we're seeing in this chapter. But if we lay down the simple kit of spiritual tools that out of this book and our experience, man, we might just be a small part of their miracle. All right. So it says sometimes he will be so interested that he becomes really neglectful. Your house is filled with strangers. You may not like some of them. He gets stirred up about their troubles, but not at all about yours. It will do little good if you point that out and urge more attention for yourself. We find it a real mistake to dampen his enthusiasm for alcoholic work, because I need to do this to maintain my sobriety. Now, I'll just go on a very quick etymological tangent. Enthusiasm is Greek, and the definition of enthusiasm, one of the definitions, is to be filled with God's Spirit. And one of the most sure signs that we have had a spiritual awakening is the desire to go help somebody else, which is not to say if you're like, I don't have the desire to go help somebody, that we don't do that. We do it anyways. You know, like, I haven't had a spiritual awakening. I don't want to help others. No, go do it anyways. Go do it anyways. That's my sponsorship style. That's okay. Do it anyways. All right. And it says, so here's the direction. You should join in his efforts as much as you possibly can. We suggest that you direct some of your thought to the wives of his new alcoholic friends. They need the counsel and love of a woman who has gone through what you have. That idea of, if I'm feeling that jealous or insecure, go help somebody, go get out of self, go carry this message, these 12 steps, to somebody who might need it or who might want it. Sometimes those are different. And it says, it is probably true that you and your husband have been living too much alone. And we're going to really get into in the next chapter about how drinking isolates the family. You know, this illness isolates the family. For drinking many times isolates the wife of an alcoholic. Therefore, you probably need fresh interests and a great cause to live for. And it says, as much as your husband. And I mean, that's what I will say is my experience is these 12 steps have given my life meaning and purpose beyond anything I could have ever imagined. And so it says, if you cooperate, working towards helping others rather than complain, you will find his excess enthusiasm will tone down. We will find that middle ground. We will. Both of you will awaken. And awakening sounds like a spiritual awakening, doesn't it? Awaken to a new sense of responsibility for others. You, as well as your husband, ought to think of what you can put into life instead of how much you can take out. And what's really cool about that is that ties in with the third step promises, where it talks about how we'll be established on such a footing, we'll be less and less interested in our little plans and designs, focusing on what I can give rather than get. And we also saw that in the chapter working with others. And working with others, it spoke about like, hey, if you want to go to an event where there's drinking, okay, ask yourself these questions, check your motives on these specific things, but focus on, so I'll just summarize real quick. I need to be recovered, which is to say, having worked the steps, living in step 10, 11, 12, continuing to take inventory, to continue to grow spiritually. I'm sponsoring others. I'm trying to carry this message, and that I'm showing up with good motives, that I'm not on shaky ground, you know, but the key was focus on what you can give. And that's always been for me that key for anything. Social anxiety. If you have to show up to a meeting you've never gone to before, or a work function, or a wedding, focus on what we can give. That makes the huge difference. And it's when I give, and I give from that God-centered place, what I come to find out is that thing that I'm giving is abundant. See, when I'm showing up and I'm trying to get, what that looks like is, what about me? What are they going to think of me? Will they like me? And it's like I start getting constricted, and I come from this place of scarcity. One of my, there's this wonderful one of my medieval spiritual ladies who I just love. She has this line where it's like, "Thou dost dilate my heart," where it's like when I'm God centered, it's like this expansion, it's this abundance. And so that line, inevitably, your lives will be fuller for doing so. So when I give, I truly receive. When I give from that God-centered place, man, the stuff that I give is abundant. I give love and tolerance and patience. I begin to feel that that is abundant. It's everywhere. And it says you will lose the old life to find one much better. Sneaky little promise, a new life. And that's what's available for us. And we only have 1 minute left, so it's actually not a bad place to leave off. So where we will pick up next week are the directions on what to do about a relapse, which is like perfect because it's a cliffhanger, and it's like it's a little bit of like a what is that? Ooh, come back next week and find out. Exciting. Or you can just read ahead on your own. That's fine too. You have the freedom. But I hope to see you guys back next week. So what I'll do is I'll stop the recording and do it so we can all unmute and we can say the prayer together. So, alrighty.